The heat of the midday sun beat down relentlessly on the farm as I stood by the worn-out wooden fence, my hands resting on the splintered wood. The air was thick with dust, and the faint sound of livestock could be heard in the distance. I wiped the sweat from my brow, looking over the land that had been my life for the past few weeks, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of resentment bubbling up inside me. It all started when my mother-in-law, who had always been quick to share her opinion, casually mentioned that she and her husband were planning a vacation abroad. She didn't ask me if I was free or available to help. She simply assumed I would be more than happy to take care of their sprawling farm. I've always prided myself on being a helpful and family-oriented person, but something about her tone felt off. There was no mention of a flight ticket or any offer to make things easier for me. No, I was just expected to handle everything. "Don't worry," she said with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. "You can look after the farm while we're away. We'll be back in a few weeks. Everything will be fine." Those words echoed in my mind as the days dragged on. The farm, which had been a source of peace and simplicity before, now felt like a heavy burden. The animals needed feeding, the crops needed tending, and there were constant little issues cropping up that required my attention. The weight of it all was slowly sinking in, and with each passing day, I wondered why I had agreed to this in the first place. But what choice did I have? Family. It's all about family, right? When they finally returned, I thought it would be a relief. But what I hadn't anticipated was how much things would change between us after that. The air of expectation and unspoken tension was thick, and the question hanging over everything was clear. Did I make a mistake by agreeing to look after the farm, or was I about to find out just how deep my role in this family really was? It had only been a few days since my mother-in-law and father-in-law left for their vacation, but the weight of their absence had already begun to feel overwhelming. It wasn't just the chores that piled up each day, feeding the animals, watering the plants, cleaning the barn. It was the unspoken pressure that loomed like a dark cloud over me. Every morning I woke up with a sense of duty, of obligation, and yet, no real acknowledgement that I was the one holding everything together while they were off enjoying their time away. I tried to keep myself busy, hoping that the work would distract me from the growing resentment that had started to creep into my thoughts. The farm had always been a place where I felt a sense of peace, but now, with no one around to share the load, it felt like an endless, exhausting cycle. The animals were restless, the plants drooped under the scorching heat, and the weight of responsibility sat heavily on my shoulders. But it wasn't just the physical demands of farm life that wore on me. It was the realization that I had been taken for granted. When my mother-in-law had asked me to look after the farm, there had been no mention of compensating me or offering help in any way. It wasn't like she didn't have the means. After all, they lived comfortably, and I knew they could afford to send me a flight ticket or even offer a small token of appreciation for the work I was doing. Yet, not a word. Not even a thank you. As the days wore on, I found myself questioning everything. My mind began to wander back to the conversation we had before they left. She had said it so casually, as though it was just a given that I would take care of everything. But why didn't she ask my opinion? Why didn't she offer to make things easier for me? Instead, it felt as though I was expected to take on the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law, the one who would always put family first, no matter the cost. The tension between us had started to build long before they left. My relationship with my mother-in-law had always been strained, but I had tried to make it work. I didn't want to cause trouble or rock the boat, but it was hard to ignore the underlying tension that existed whenever we were in the same room. She was a woman who held her opinions tightly, who never hesitated to offer unsolicited advice, and who had a way of making me feel small, as though I could never quite measure up to her expectations. I could tell that my husband noticed the strain between us, though he never seemed to acknowledge it outright. He loved his parents, and while he could see that things weren't perfect between me and his mother, he was often caught in the middle, unsure of how to navigate the delicate balance of family dynamics. He never questioned his mother's actions, and he never asked me how I was feeling about the situation. He just assumed that I would handle it, that I would manage, because that's what I always did. There were moments when I wanted to confront him, to tell him how I felt, but every time I opened my mouth, the words seemed to die in my throat. I didn't want to create a rift between us, but I also couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I was tired, tired of carrying the weight of responsibility, tired of feeling like I had to prove myself, tired of feeling like I didn't matter in this family. One evening, as I stood outside the barn, brushing down one of the horses, I saw my husband's truck pull into the driveway. He had been working late again, and I knew he would be exhausted, just like I was. As he walked towards me, I noticed the way he avoided my gaze. It was a small thing, but it didn't escape me. He knew something was wrong, but he wasn't ready to address it. "Hey," he said, his voice soft, as though unsure of how to begin. "How's everything going with the farm?" I sighed, trying to force a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "Same as always. The animals are fine, the crops are fine. Just a lot of work, you know." He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I can imagine. You're doing a great job." The words should have been comforting, but they didn't hit the way they used to. "You know, it would have been nice if your mom had at least offered to buy me a ticket or sent some help," I said before I could stop myself. The frustration that had been simmering for days suddenly spilled out, raw and unfiltered. "I've been doing everything on my own, and it feels like she doesn't even care." My husband looked taken aback, his brows furrowing as he processed my words. "What are you talking about? She asked you to help out, and you agreed." "She's been clear about it." "What's the big deal?" I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "The big deal is that she didn't even offer to make it easier for me. She didn't even ask if I was okay with it. She just assumed I would drop everything to help her out. And now I'm stuck here, doing all the work while they're off enjoying themselves. I just feel like I'm not being appreciated." The silence between us grew thick, and for a moment, I thought he might say something to defend his mother. But instead, he looked away as though trying to find the right words to say. "I get that you're frustrated," he finally said, his voice low. "But you agreed to do this, and we're a team. We've always been a team. If you need help, just say something." "I shouldn't have to ask for help," I said, my voice trembling. "It should just be there. You're always so busy with work, and I'm always expected to pick up the slack. I don't want to keep feeling like I'm invisible." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I didn't know you felt like this. I thought you'd be fine with it. But I get it now. I'll talk to my mom when she gets back." I nodded, but the tension still hung in the air. I didn't know if his words would make any difference, but I appreciated that he finally saw the strain I was under. I wasn't sure how things would play out once his parents returned, but one thing was certain: everything had changed. My relationship with my mother-in-law, my husband, and even myself had been tested in ways I never expected. And now, the only thing left to do was wait. Wait for them to return. Wait for the conversation that would inevitably take place. And wait for the answers that would finally reveal the true nature of the relationships I had been trying so hard to hold together. The days stretched on, each one feeling like a repetition of the last. The weight of my growing resentment simmered just below the surface, but I buried it under the work that needed to be done. The farm was relentless. The chickens had to be fed, the garden needed weeding, the barn cleaned, and the horses cared for. I did it all without a single moment to myself. I had become a machine, moving through each task without thought, my body moving on autopilot as my mind churned with frustration. It wasn't just the physical work that exhausted me, it was the emotional toll of feeling invisible. The silence from my mother-in-law loomed in the background like a shadow, reminding me of the unspoken expectation that I should take care of everything. It was as if she had simply assumed I would step into her shoes without question, without acknowledgement of the effort it would take. And yet, not a single word of thanks, no acknowledgement of the exhaustion that was slowly eating me away from the inside. The farm, once a place of calm, had become my prison. I had tried to push the growing tension aside, to bury my resentment and focus on the task at hand. But it was impossible. Every little thing seemed to remind me of my mother-in-law's absence and her complete lack of consideration. I caught myself daydreaming about what it would be like to leave the farm behind, to walk away from the endless cycle of responsibility. I longed for a vacation of my own, for a moment of peace where I wasn't responsible for the entire world around me. I didn't even know if my husband would understand. There was a deep sadness that came with all this, a loneliness that grew with each passing day. My husband, as much as I loved him, had become distant. I knew he was busy with work, but his reluctance to even acknowledge my feelings only deepened the divide between us. He hadn't yet spoken to his mother about what had happened. Despite my attempts to open up, his responses were always the same, gentle reassurances, but no action. He couldn't see what I was going through, and part of me didn't know how to make him understand. It felt like we were on two separate paths, and our once clear bond had started to unravel at the edges. The mornings became the hardest. My husband would leave for work early, his absence a reminder that I was alone, left to shoulder the burden of a family business that I wasn't even sure I was wanted in. I started to feel resentful of the fact that, no matter how hard I worked, I wasn't enough. Not for my mother-in-law, and sometimes not even for my husband. My self-doubt began to eat away at my confidence. Was I doing something wrong? Was there a way to be a better wife, a better daughter-in-law? Or was I simply invisible? One afternoon, as I sat in the quiet barn, sorting through hay bales, my mind wandered again. It was just a little over a week before my in-laws were set to return, and the pressure of it all was getting to me. The physical exhaustion wasn't the worst part anymore. It was the constant ache of being ignored, of not being seen. The simple act of asking for a flight ticket had become an internal battle, one that I had chosen to fight alone. And I didn't know if it would be worth it in the end. That evening, I decided to confront my husband again. He had been home for hours, but as usual, he was buried in his phone or his laptop, too caught up in work to even notice me. The silence between us had become suffocating. I had reached a breaking point, and I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I needed to talk, needed him to understand. I found him in the living room, slouched on the couch, his eyes glued to the screen. He barely looked up as I walked in. "Hey, can we talk?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. He sighed, setting the phone down on the coffee table. "Yeah, of course. What's up?" "I need to tell you how I'm feeling," I said, the words rushing out in a flood. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. Your mom, she didn't even think to offer me help when she left. And it's not just about the work. It's about feeling like I don't matter. Like I'm just a placeholder while she's gone." My husband's expression shifted, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "I didn't realize you felt this way," he said quietly. "But you know she asked you to take care of things because she trusts you. And I trust you too. You're doing great." "But that's the problem," I said, my voice shaking. "It's not just about trust. I don't need your trust, I need your support. I'm doing everything, and I'm doing it alone. Why can't she see that? Why didn't she book me a ticket, or offer to help, or at least say thank you? Why am I expected to just drop everything while she gets to take a vacation and enjoy herself?" He looked at me for a long moment, then ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't know it was this bad. I thought you were handling everything fine." "Of course I'm handling it," I snapped, immediately regretting the sharpness in my voice. "But it doesn't mean it's not killing me inside. I need help. I need to feel like I matter, not just to you, but to your family. This feeling of being taken for granted is suffocating me." He stood up, looking guilty but helpless. "I'm sorry. I should have noticed sooner. I'll talk to my mom when they get back. I promise." I nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't enough. Talking wasn't going to fix the feelings of betrayal that had been growing between us. Talking wasn't going to fix the way I felt abandoned by the very people I had always tried to support. I wanted action, not empty promises. As the conversation ended, I retreated to the bedroom, the frustration still boiling inside me. But what else could I do? My husband had promised to talk to his mother, but I wasn't sure that would make a difference. She was always so sure of herself, so controlling. Would she even listen? And if she didn't, would I be strong enough to stand up for myself when it came time to confront her? The next few days passed in a blur. My husband tried to make things better, bringing me small gestures of kindness, flowers, extra time off the farm, helping out with the animals when he could. But the damage had already been done. The foundation of my relationship with my mother-in-law was cracked, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. And with each day that passed, the pressure grew. It felt like the world was waiting for something to happen. I didn't know when it would come, but I felt it. A storm was coming. It had been building slowly, an invisible force creeping in. I didn't know what the future would hold, But I knew one thing for sure: everything would change when my in-laws returned. The tension, the unspoken words, the frustration, everything was about to come to a head. And when it did, I wasn't sure if I was ready for the consequences. The day had finally arrived. My in-laws were coming back, and the weight of anticipation was unbearable. The air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. I stood at the edge of the driveway, the farm sprawled out behind me, all the hard work that had been done over the past few weeks suddenly feeling less like an accomplishment and more like an anchor weighing me down. I had no idea how this was going to play out. Would they acknowledge everything I'd been through? Would they apologize? Or would it all be swept under the rug, just like it always had been? I glanced at the house, half expecting to see my husband running around, making preparations. But there was nothing. He was inside, and the silence between us felt deafening. He had tried to make things better in his own way, but his small gestures, helping with the farm, bringing me flowers, had done little to bridge the growing distance between us. He was doing his best, but it wasn't enough. I needed more than his empty promises. I needed him to take a stand, to defend me, to show his mother that I wasn't just a pawn in her game. The car finally pulled up, dust trailing behind it as it rumbled down the dirt road. My heart skipped a beat, and my palms began to sweat. The moment I had been dreading had arrived. My mother-in-law stepped out first, her presence as imposing as ever. She had the same confident stride, the same air of authority that I had come to associate with her. My father-in-law followed, smiling as he greeted me with his usual warm demeanor. But there was no mention of the farm, no recognition of the months I had spent working here without so much as a thank you. "Well, look at this," my mother-in-law said, taking in the sight of the well-kept barn, the animals grazing peacefully, the crops thriving under the hot sun. "I see you've done well here. Good job." I fought to keep my voice steady. "I've done my best," I replied, the words feeling heavy in my mouth. "But it hasn't been easy." She gave me a sidelong glance, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "Well, you signed up for it, didn't you?" The words stung, but I held my ground. "Yes, I did. But you didn't offer to make it easier for me. No ticket, no help, no acknowledgement of the work I've been doing. I didn't ask for much, but a little appreciation would have been nice." Her face tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I thought you were capable. I didn't think I needed to spell everything out for you. We trusted you to take care of things, and you've done well. What more do you want?" That was it. The dam inside me broke, the frustration and anger that I had been holding in for so long pouring out in a flood. "You think I've done well?" I asked, my voice rising. "You think it was enough for me to simply do well while you're off on vacation, enjoying your time while I'm left here, exhausted and ignored? I'm not some hired help. I'm your daughter-in-law, and I deserve more than just being treated like a convenience. I deserve respect, and I didn't get it from you." The words felt foreign coming out of my mouth, but the release of them was like a breath of fresh air. It was terrifying, but freeing at the same time. My husband stepped forward, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Okay, let's all just take a breath," he said, his voice strained. "This isn't the time for shouting. We're all tired from the trip and emotions are running high." But I wasn't finished. "No, I've been holding this in for too long. You've been telling me to handle things for weeks, but nobody's been there when I needed help. You didn't even think to check on me. Not once. You just assumed I would take care of everything. You didn't ask me how I felt. You didn't ask if I was okay. And when I needed support the most, I had to ask for it, but it was never enough." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with tension. My mother-in-law stood frozen, her face flushed with anger or embarrassment, maybe both. My father-in-law looked uncomfortable, shuffling his feet and glancing at my husband for reassurance. But it was too late for reassurance. The cracks that had been slowly forming over the past weeks had finally broken wide open. I didn't realize it was this bad," my husband said, his voice quieter now. "I thought everything was fine. I thought you were just handling it." "I was handling it," I said sharply. "But I wasn't doing it alone. I was doing it for the both of us, for this family. But it feels like that doesn't matter to anyone. It's always been expected of me, like I should just be happy to play the role of the perfect wife and daughter-in-law. But I'm not a machine. I have my limits and they've been tested. I don't know if I can keep doing this if it means I'm invisible to you. The words hung in the air, unresolved, raw, and unspoken truths that had been buried for far too long. My mother-in-law opened her mouth as if to say something, but then she closed it again, her gaze falling to the ground. My father-in-law stepped forward, his eyes filled with something between guilt and confusion. I never meant to make you feel this way, he said quietly. I thought you were happy here, taking care of the farm. But it's clear I've misunderstood. I'm sorry. His words were a small comfort, but they didn't undo the damage. My mother-in-law's face remained unreadable, and I couldn't tell if she was angry, ashamed, or simply indifferent. My husband's eyes, though, told a different story. He had been quiet, absorbed in the tension of the moment, but I could see the gears turning in his mind. For the first time in a long time, I felt like he was really listening, really understanding. I don't know what's going to happen next, I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. But I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. We need to have a real conversation about our family, about expectations, and about what I need in this marriage. I can't keep doing it all, and I won't. My mother-in-law's expression softened, just a little. For the first time, she seemed to consider my words, and though I couldn't be sure, I thought I saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. My husband finally reached out, placing a hand on my arm, a silent apology in his touch. This was the turning point. The moment everything had been leading to. The confrontation had been inevitable, but what mattered now was what came after it. Would my in-laws truly hear me? Would my husband finally stand by me? Or would this moment be another empty promise? The storm had passed, but the calm that followed felt uncertain. The silence that followed our heated exchange was heavy, almost suffocating. My mother-in-law had turned away, her back stiff, while my father-in-law stood there, awkwardly shifting his weight from one foot to the other, unsure of how to proceed. My husband's hand was still resting on my arm, a silent gesture of support, but I could feel the weight of the unspoken words between us. I never wanted to make you feel like this, my father-in-law finally said, his voice low and apologetic. We've taken you for granted, and I see now how that's wrong. I'm sorry. His apology, though long overdue, struck me more than I had expected. It wasn't enough to erase the frustration I'd felt, nor could it undo the months of resentment I had bottled up, but hearing him say the words made me realize something. Maybe there was hope for reconciliation after all. Maybe things could change. My mother-in-law remained silent, still turned away from the group, her arms crossed tightly in front of her. It was clear she wasn't ready to engage, and I couldn't blame her. Her pride had been wounded in a way that couldn't be easily healed. But I also knew that there was only so much I could do. I had spoken my truth, and now it was up to her to decide whether she wanted to meet me halfway. Turning to my husband, I finally spoke again, my voice softer this time. I don't want to fight with her. I don't want to keep feeling this way. But I need her to understand where I'm coming from. I can't keep carrying this alone. I don't want to feel invisible in this family anymore. I know, he said, his voice tinged with guilt. I'm sorry. I should have noticed sooner. I should have done more. I'll talk to her. We'll figure this out. I promise. His words were comforting, but part of me still wasn't sure if he truly understood the weight of it all. Would he actually stand up to his mother? Or would he fall back into old habits, letting her take control while I was left to deal with the fallout? As the evening wore on, the tension slowly began to lift, but the air still felt charged with unresolved emotions. The dinner that followed was awkward, to say the least. My mother-in-law remained distant, her usual sharp comments replaced with silence, while my father-in-law tried to make up for it by offering compliments that didn't quite feel genuine. My husband was caught in the middle, offering small gestures of support but unsure of how to handle the situation. But despite the discomfort, something shifted in the air. My mother-in-law hadn't immediately shut me out, and I hadn't completely given up on her. We were all standing on the edge of something, a new beginning or a deepening divide. The question was whether we would choose to move forward or let the distance grow even wider. Later that evening, as I was putting away the dishes, my husband came up behind me, his voice soft. I talked to my mom. She wasn't happy about it, but she said she understands where you're coming from. She doesn't always show it, but I think she's starting to realize that you're not just here to do her bidding. You have a voice and you deserve to be heard. I turned to him, meeting his gaze. For the first time in a long while, I saw sincerity in his eyes. Do you really think she'll change? I don't know, he admitted, his shoulders slumping slightly. But I'm going to make sure she does. I'll keep pushing her. We need to have a different kind of relationship, one where we both see each other as equals. His words filled me with a sense of hope, though the road ahead would still be rocky. It wasn't going to be easy, and I knew that the challenges we faced weren't going to disappear overnight. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a possibility of change. My husband had finally taken a stand, and for that, I was grateful. Over the next few days, the dynamics between us slowly began to shift. My mother-in-law, while still distant, started to engage more, albeit in her own guarded way. She didn't offer any grand apologies, but there was a subtle change in her demeanor, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the hard work I had put into keeping everything running while they were gone. One evening, after dinner, she pulled me aside. Her face was serious, her eyes searching mine. "I want to apologize for how I've treated you," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on you, and I see now that I haven't been fair." I wasn't sure how to respond. Her apology was unexpected, and I could feel the weight of the moment hanging between us. "Thank you," I said simply, unsure of where we stood, but grateful for the sincerity in her voice. "I appreciate that." "I'm not perfect," she continued, her voice softening. "And I know I haven't made it easy for you. But I do want to make things right if we can." I nodded, feeling a cautious optimism growing inside me. "We'll figure it out. It's going to take time, but we can try." The conversation felt like a fragile truce, but it was a start. I knew it wouldn't be smooth sailing from here on out. We all had a long way to go, especially when it came to building a relationship that was rooted in respect and understanding. But for the first time, I felt like my mother-in-law was willing to meet me halfway, and that, in itself, was a victory. As the days turned into weeks, the atmosphere on the farm began to change. There were still moments of tension, old habits die hard, after all, but there was also a sense of growth. My husband kept his promise to be more supportive, and I no longer felt like I was fighting a battle on my own. My relationship with my mother-in-law, though still complicated, was no longer defined by resentment. We were beginning to find common ground, one small step at a time. And as for the farm, it had become more than just a place of work for me. It was a place where I had learned about my own strength, about standing up for myself, and about the importance of setting boundaries. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I was no longer invisible. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was moving forward, not alone, but with the people who mattered. As I stood on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The farm, which had once felt like a burden, now seemed to hold a different energy, one of possibility, of healing. The weight that had pressed down on me for so long, the feeling of being unseen and unappreciated, was slowly lifting. It wasn't gone completely, but it was fading, replaced with a sense of agency I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My mother-in-law and I had come to a silent understanding. We didn't have to be best friends, but we had found a way to exist in the same space without constantly clashing. There were still moments of tension, sure, but there was a mutual respect that hadn't been there before. She had acknowledged the hard work I'd put into the farm, and while her apology hadn't been grand or dramatic, it was enough to begin the process of rebuilding. It was a start. And then there was my husband. For the first time in a long time, I truly felt seen by him. He had stepped up, acknowledging the emotional weight I'd been carrying. We were still figuring things out, still learning how to communicate better, but we were taking the necessary steps together. His promise to defend me, to stand by me, was a promise that mattered now, and I believed in it. The farm no longer felt like a place where I was trapped by expectations. It had become my space, a place where I could breathe and grow, not just in the work I did, but in the person I had become. I had learned to stand up for myself, to assert my needs, and to expect more than just empty gestures. And in doing so, I had rediscovered my worth, not just in my role on the farm or in my marriage, but in my own eyes. There would always be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, of friction. But I knew now that I wasn't invisible. I wasn't just a caretaker, a silent observer in my own life. I was a partner, a daughter-in-law, and above all, a person who deserved respect. And that was the most empowering realization of all. The future, though uncertain, felt a little brighter now, one step at a time.